Hello, team. Welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MSP. This is Ukraine War News Update. First part thereof second part actually, for the 19th of August 2023, but this is my hits and losses video. I'm going to rush through this fairly quickly. You will hear the sounds of a room being packed up as we leave our holiday destination to return back to the UK imminently. Very sad day for all of humanity, as I have to leave a wonderful holiday location. Nonetheless, I will press on. This is the Ukrainian general staff figures for the Russian losses for the day before. All the usual caveats apply, and you can find those caveats in the description to the video below. We have 1,120 personnel lost, which is in the middle of the range that we've been expecting post sort of post Kursk start. Well, no, sorry, post Kharkiv. Really, it's been 1,000 plus for an awful long time now, and I think Kharkiv is adding to that considerably for the Russian losses in terms of dead, wounded, POWs, and deserters. So that's 1,120, not the highest, not the lowest, but anything over 1,000 is incredibly significant. 5 tanks is less than the daily average. 15 troop carrying AFVs is also less than the daily average. That stands at about 17 or so at the moment. I need to check that. I need to do another run through Dell's stats. Fun fact, I'm going out for a beer with Dell soon. Anyway, artillery systems, 48 of those. That is over double the daily average, but slightly lower than we have seen, but still really significant. 4 multiple launch rocket systems is high. 2 anti-aircraft warfare systems is high, and if they are high-value systems, then that's a bad day at the office for the Russians. There was a claim last night, and I don't know if it's included in this one. There's a claim that the Russians lost an S-400 system, a Triumph system, which would be incredibly high value if that actually happened. 55 vehicles and fuel tanks, fairly significant. 17 pieces of special equipment, very high in that category. So let's look at Andrew Perpetua's loss list for yesterday, and we have slightly more Russian losses than Ukrainian losses. In terms of combat asset losses, broadly the same. Probably Russians maybe lost 1 or 2 more. Near parity, because one would assume the Ukrainians are on the attack up in Kursk, and the Russians are on the attack in Pokrovsk, so they're both trotting away their own forces. The question is, who is getting the best return on investment there? I know that I am referring to human lives often here, so that's probably wrong language, but you get the point. Is if you're losing this amount of kit, how much land are you gaining? How much tactical, operational, strategic even gains are you getting? So the Ukrainians here losing nothing particularly valuable, no air defense systems or anything like that. We've got a couple of howitzers damaged. We have a tank abandoned T-64, a BMP damaged, and that's it. Until the rest are APCs and MRAPs. And I say then that's it because actually the Ukrainians have a lot of APCs and MRAPs of all the vehicles they've been given. They've been given the most of these types. So they've got Humvees, they've got Senators. They've even got, look, a Kirpi's been destroyed here. Those are provided. That's I think the Turkish word for hedgehog. They've been provided a load of those previously. They have a lot of APCs and MRAPs. M113s are coming. So if they're going to lose anything, then you prefer that they lose these bits of kit. And indeed, 100% of these are abandoned or destroyed. So unfortunately, that kind of ratio there is not great, but they haven't lost all that many. There's only 4 APCs and 3 MRAPs. So a right range of them: Humvees, Senators, Kozak, Kirpi, etc., etc. And then we're down to civilian vehicles. So nothing too crazy for the Ukrainians. The Russians have lost an electronic warfare system, Article P. I don't know the value of that. And then, so nothing crazy high value there. Artillery captured MT-12 Rapira. We saw that up in Kursk. BM-21 multiple launch rocket system destroyed there, and then a couple of D-20s. We've got a T-90M abandoned, It was abandoned after getting stuck and then was hit by an FPV drone. So that's the highest value tank that the Russians used, the newest tank. A TE-80BV destroyed as well, and then a couple of IFVs, and the rest are APCs, 6 APCs, most of them BTR-70s. Nothing crazy there. Fairly high percentage, or very high percentage, of destroyed and damaged, and that's the case for both sides. Artillery notwithstanding for the Ukrainians. And then, yeah, usual trucks and civilian vehicles. Look at all those civilian vehicles, either destroyed or one captured. An electronic warfare loaf. I don't know what it means by that, but anyway, that was captured. So, and a captured truck as well. Interesting that we're starting to see more captured vehicles as they go into Kursk, the Ukrainians. Okay. So, moving on to other sources, John Hardy here says a Ukrainian official told the Wall Street Journal that Ukraine has captured 2,000 Russian POWs in Kursk Oblast. A few days ago, the Financial Times, reported that Ukrainian officials and soldiers said hundreds. There was a claim that 150 are being added a day. So all these various claims, upwards of 2,000 is your high end, but that seems to be what an official estimate appears to be. So, I don't know. I know that they have had logistical problems with processing as the POWs because they have so many. And this is definitely good for the Ukrainians. They can put these people into the exchange fund, get their own soldiers back. And also the idea that many of these will be, I think we worked out, was it 75%, 80% of them from stats the other day that were being processed into a POW center. 80% of them, I think, were conscripts, and that's not going to play well with families. These will be young men, usually, who won't be volunteering. It's just part of the National Conscription Service, and their parents and families and friends will not be happy losing conscripts, and that turns into discontent about the war. Okay. We have, as mentioned, the rumor that the Ukrainians destroyed an S-400 air defense. This says division here. I don't know about that, but no report says, according to Ukrainian Tivaz artillery group, Russian S-400 air defense complex was hit overnight. We're still waiting for visual confirmation, so that might come out later today or so. There have been quite a few big attacks taking place. I say big attack, not compared to maybe 2 years ago, but relative to recent times. So 8 vehicles were destroyed or damaged in a large attack at Vuhledar. We had Kurakova yesterday, saw a large number of vehicles taken out. The Ukrainians are still doing fairly well at repelling some of these larger Russian attacks. The Russians are still carrying out some of these larger attacks in various areas along the front line. As long as the Ukrainians are bleeding the Russians for every square meter that they might be conceding, then that is what the Ukrainians will need. It's a game of who can take the most territory at the moment for the least amount of material cost. Okay, now we're going to just very briefly pop into Kursk to say that the Ukrainian FPV attack drones are currently prowling critical Russian supply lines along the E38 highway between Rilsk and Lugov in Kursk Oblast. Russian mill bloggers on the ground are calling it FPV kill zone. But what's important about this is they've got an attack going up from Koronovo to Rilsk, and then they're moving up towards Lugov. But the idea is that the road between those two places is not what they're moving along. That is a supply road, a main road that connects two of these larger towns or cities. And if the Ukrainians have some kind of fire control over that with their drones, then my goodness, that's making life difficult for the Russians. I presume drones are playing a very major part in the activity up in Kursk. Interesting that some of these red arrows are changing, so the Russians might be attacking again at Martinivka and less so over here, but I don't know how updated this map is coming from OSINT Technical. I'd have to look at Andrew Perpetua's again. We'll return to Kursk briefly in a wee while. So then there is a targeting of a claimed Ukrainian 5P85-1 transporter erector launcher for the S-300 PT air defense system. Now, War Vehicle Tracker, who's a pretty honest guy here. He gets a lot of slack for being, gets a lot of criticism for being pro-Russian. He's not pro-Russian at all. He just calls out when Ukrainian things are blown up. But again, there is some doubt about the not the veracity of the strike, but the veracity of whether it is an S-300 PT air defense system. Some things are suspicious, he says. One, lack of any other components. Usually S-300 PT tells stand in pairs. There's no other pair. And two, the description claims ignition of missiles. However, there isn't any visible. There does seem to be a fuel fire next to the tail, but after the detonation. However, this could be explained by the warhead setting the grass on fire. They claim it was shooting missiles at civilians in Belgorod. So it could be a Ukrainian S-300 that was hit, but it could also be a decoy. There are a number of decoys getting hit at the moment. And we've seen plenty of decoys being manufactured. We've seen plenty of inflatables and wooden or metal decoys. You would assume, if you see them, then as in you see them at some kind of depot or whatever, and they are going to be put in places and they are going to attract the Russians to strike them. Likewise for the Russians have a fair number of decoys as well. So we should expect a decent amount of decoys to be taken out, and that will, of course, waste expensive munitions on both sides. Right. There's been a fire and explosion at a traction substation in the Trans-Siberian Railway in Marinsk in Kemerovo region. That's up in Siberia. So this is 3,300 kilometers, I think, away from the front line. So I don't think this is a strike, but it could be sabotage. This has put out the Trans-Siberian Railway certainly for a good few hours. That's a major issue, I think, there. So yeah, it could be sabotage, and if so, it is another example of how easy it is, I think, to disrupt major services and anything really with fire. I keep warning that fire is becoming the weapon of choice for any kind of subterfuge. We are seeing more and more of Russia, I think. I don't know. Is this another sign that everything in Russia is under pressure at the moment? Or am I being biased? Right, explosions at a petrochemical plant in Sterlitamak. 3 people were injured. And this is exactly the same kind of incident that we saw, that we see here with the Trans-Siberian Railway. Russian media claimed that an overhead gas pipeline caught fire there. According to preliminary data, the accident injured 3 people. As Buzzer writes, in the morning, the company was conducting a blowout of the pipe, followed by an explosion. A huge black column of smoke rose above the accident site. There were 4 explosions in total, and the reason for that was a depressurization of the overhead line of the gas pipeline. Or it was struck, but I don't know. I don't know that it was. I think this might be quite far away as well. This is another, petrochemical plant, a big old fire there going off. And talking of big old fires, let's get to the strikes, the overnight strikes. Now, although nothing particularly significant took place either side of the border overnight, no missile attack was sent into Ukraine from Russia overnight. 11 attack drones were launched. 100% of them were taken down in a number of places: Mykolaiv, Cherkasy, Vinnytsia, Kiev, Dnipropetrovsk, Kharkiv, Sumy, and Donetsk regions. 11 out of 11, 100% interception rate, really good from the Ukrainians again there. Russia claimed that their air defenses were reasonably quiet as well. Kremlin claimed 5 Ukrainian attack drones were stopped over Belgorod, Kursk, and Oryol regions. Nothing too much to report. So we're going to go back to a strike that took place actually. So I say not last night, but the night before, and it was in the evening of the night before. So this was the strike on the Russian oil depot in Rostov Oblast, setting several storage tanks alight. So that was what initially happened. And that was the evening of 2 nights ago. Then that turned into Ukrainian attack drones successfully hit Russian oil depot. Nearly 24 hours later, the oil depot continues to burn. Over 250 firefighters and 3 firefighting trains have been dispatched to the site. So we've got firefighting trains there. Then this was what it looked like yesterday. The Kavkaz oil depot continues to be ablaze. Earlier, it was attacked by Ukrainian drones. Huge fire there. absolutely phenomenal sides of that. And then this is what it looks like now. So the oil facility in Proletarsk right now, the level of destruction seen in in the footage only allows a conclusion that this facility, which is only in recent years fully overhauled and extended, has sustained a fatal hit, says Tendar. I mean, so that is what 2 days of burning, and that is not looking good there. Uh, and not looking good for the environment, goodness me. But that's war, isn't it? It's horrible. That is and I believe that oil depot was primarily supplying the army as well. So that's a very significant hit that the Ukrainians have managed on the Russians there. Okay, we're going to go to another bridge being hit, and I think this is a third one on the same river in the Kursk region, which will affect that Glushkovsky district beneath the same river. And now it appears that there is no way that the Russians can easily supply their troops or indeed settlements south of that river. And they do have, well, a pontoon bridge. There are reports that the pontoon bridge got hit yesterday as well. So it could be in a lot of trouble in that particular area. As you can see from this image, this is Andrew Perpetua's mapping originally. We have these three bridges now taken out. According to Russian mill blogger Romanov, Ukraine has destroyed a third and last bridge over the same. Though the last and second, at least the second bridge remains passable on foot and possibly light vehicles. I'd say a quad bike at the most. It's very thin what's left of the second one. Movement of heavy vehicles will be impeded. This is a bad blow to Russian logistics, says Colby Badwa. If the bridges can be further destroyed and pontoon efforts disrupted, a lot more Russians could be taken prisoner if they remain south of the river. I think there are claims of 700 troops possibly south of the river there, and I would imagine they are getting rather nervous at the moment. There is also quite a few videos coming out of JDAM hits. This is Tetkino, which is, to go back to that map, this is down here. We have seen Tetkino be struck by JDAMs and HIMARS consistently recently. The border outpost there has been completely destroyed. Several buildings taken out in Tetkino that have strategic value, one would think, or tactical value. Another couple of JDAM ERs. So these are the guided glide bombs that the US have provided to Ukraine that they are using. Tetkino, again, is getting a lot of unwanted attention, as the Russians would think. So anyway, moving on to other bits and pieces. Damage caused to Ukraine's environment, as just mentioned, by Russia's invasion already exceeds $60 billion and counting. Quote, the consequences of such crimes also extend to other countries, in particular to Moldova and Romania, declared Ukraine's Minister of Environmental Protection. And of course, the whole world, when you're talking about the greenhouse gases being emitted by those massive oil depots going up in smoke. Okay, Russian commentator Anatoly Nezmian believes that the Russian army is unable to stop the Kursk breakthrough due to the ossification of the system, so the kind of fossilization of the system, and can only continue to move by inertia in the Donetsk region, which is interesting. So, they're just continuing to move just for momentum sake in Donetsk, but it's basically ossified, which means it can't really react to anything in any quick and dynamic manner. Interesting evaluation there. It is clear why the government is slow to mobilize its existing capabilities and resources. There are well-founded fears that the shagreen skin effect will begin when closing one hole. You will immediately create several new ones. That's what I call the blanket analogy, where the blanket's not big enough for the bed, so as soon as you pull it in one direction, you're leaving it bare in another. There's just not enough to cover the whole of the bed. Well, there just aren't the forces, there aren't the air defense capabilities to cover the whole of Russia and occupied Ukraine, so that it is a real challenge for the Russians. Right, here we have, and there's lots of footage like this. This is a Chechen lead in Kadyrov's Akhmat unit, members of the unit, because there's several, I think, on the CCTV footage, eventually breaking into a mobile phone shop in Glushkovo, so exactly where we're talking about, Glushkovo, one of the places where a bridge has been blown there. 10 kilometers from the front line, they are just looting their own shops. We are hearing that the Ukrainians are treating the Russians in Kursk much better than the Russians themselves are, where the Russians are looting their own houses and commercial properties for benefit, and that includes the soldiers themselves. The place that they're supposed to be defending, they are looting. It's just absolutely insane. According to Ukrainian sources, Russia has transferred its airborne forces from Vovchansk to the Kursk region. Now, I'm fairly sure, I might be wrong here, but the aggregate plant that was surrounded, uh, is that now under Ukrainian control in Vovchansk? I haven't done mapping for so long now, and I believe that Vovchansk, the Russians are less and less able to put the pressure on the Ukrainians there, as they're pulling forces from there to support activities in Kursk. So there's an example of Kursk causing other areas of the front line to be affected by the Russians. The Institute for the Study of War says Russian forces are likely to launch a counteroffensive in Kursk Oblast. The Institute for the Study of War reports that Russia is likely preparing a counteroffensive, potentially requiring up to 20,000 troops. Now, the question is that definitely going to happen? Where are they getting those troops? And is it going to cause effects like this in Vovchansk to take place? Now, there are all these rumors still going around. There are now further rumors to the Crimea and Transnistria rumors from Russians. These aren't from Ukrainians. Russian military blogger is now expecting attacks in the Zaporizhia region direction to come from the Ukrainians. And I think this is insanely unlikely, but nonetheless, there you go. Our reconnaissance drones monitor the territory and identify enemy groups and movements. It's also loud near Primorsky, where the enemy is trying to concentrate a group for an offensive, and a large number of armored vehicles have also been identified. There are many Ukrainians stationed in the villages. Many jeeps, pickups, minibuses, and cars are present in the military, both on the left and right banks of the settlements of Khortytsia, Lisogorka, Kanevskoye, and Belenkoye. I don't know where they are. Another proof that the enemy is concentrating his strike force not only in the Kursk sector, and all these little piggies' tales about the lack of weapons and manpower are nothing more than a cunning maneuver of the enemy. So we're hearing that the Ukrainians might have way more soldiers and equipment than they have been stating, and it's all kind of psyops that they've got a massive manpower issue. I think that's not the reality. I think there is a huge manpower issue, and it'd be amazing if the Ukrainians were able to mount several offensives like they are in Kursk at the moment, rather than just one in Kursk. Now, it appears that the Russians are starting to understand that they have a blanket that's not big enough, and they need to make their blanket bigger. How do you make your blanket bigger? Well, you get a lot more thread, don't you? In this case, how do you make your army bigger? You've got to mobilize. And this is what they've been afraid of doing since they did their last mobilization in, when was it? September 2022? Goodness me. So the Russians are afraid of mobilizing because it would be politically, could be suicidal for Putin. A mass mobilization could trigger all sorts of discontent. Now, the Russian Federation said, this is Sarin quoting from, I don't know what article, unfortunately, there's no provenance there. Russian Federation will double the number of troops in Ukraine, said Deputy Minister of Defense of Ukraine, Ivan Gavrilyuk. The number of RF armed forces in Ukraine will reach 800,000 people by the end of the year. Now, if that happens, they need to get those troops from somewhere. So I've been expecting this to happen, but it hasn't yet. And the last thing I'll say is just returning to me old mucker, Elmo. So remember that Ramzan Kadyrov has been driving a Cybertruck with a machine gun attached to the back and said, "Thank you very much, Elon Musk, for getting this to me. Really appreciate that. You're welcome to come over here anytime," and et cetera, et cetera. And there was kind of radio silence from Elon Musk. This was reported in mainstream media. And now Elon Musk has come out and denied it, but it's a little bit more interesting than this. He says, "Are you seriously so retarded that you think I donated a Cybertruck to a Russian general? That's amazing." Of course, Ramzan Kadyrov is almost certainly like sanctioned, right? There should be no easy way to get him a Cybertruck. However, 10,000 had been made, I think, something like that. So, there you go. But notice, Jane Kiev says, notice how Musk doesn't care to call out Kadyrov for lying about him. So and he calls him a Russian general as well, which I don't know. He's a warlord from Chechnya, and yeah. So what's then more interesting is that tweet has disappeared. So he's deleted it. I can't find it anywhere. So there's some bizarre stuff going on about this. I mean, there were lots of community notes about from Musk supporters saying, "Well, you could get it from anywhere," type thing. I don't know. It's all just it's not good PR for Musk. I think having a Russian warlord driving around with a Tesla calling Elon Musk awesome or whatever, and then saying that he should come over to Russia and be interviewed, because it just goes to show how much the Russians love Elon Musk, because he is one of their shills. Anyway, there you go. That's enough from me. Take care. I'm going to be traveling for the best part of a long time, so I'll speak to you probably tomorrow at some time. Who knows? Thanks so much for your support. It really is appreciated. Thanks so much to Mark and Oliner, and indeed Frank. And finally, a massive thanks to Ronald van der Stam. Really, really appreciate your support and everyone's support, and members. You are wonderful. Thank you. And in terms of when I get back, in terms of fundraising, because I've been slack on that, I need more hours in a day. But in terms of fundraising, it seemed there was a delay in the contact from NAFO reading messages. Unfortunately, she had missed a whole bunch of messages, and so we've had several weeks delay on trying to get a NAFO track sorted out. I know JR has been working on that, and I really appreciate that. But hopefully we'll resurrect that when I get back, and I'll put some effort into getting some fundraising done. Anyway, thank you so much. Take care, everybody. Speak soon.